I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. A creak in the floorboards, a shadow in the corner of your eye. There's always a logical explanation, right? That's what I used to think. But some experiences, some stories, are so deeply unsettling, they make you question everything. Tonight, I'm going to share a few of those stories with you. These aren't campfire tales. They're based on real accounts from people who swear every word is true. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the shadows together. Our first story comes from a user named TrailRunner88. He was an avid hiker who loved exploring remote trails in the Appalachian Mountains. One autumn afternoon, he decided to tackle a lesser-known path, one he'd never been on before. The air was crisp, the leaves were a riot of color, and for the first few hours, everything was perfect. But as the sun began to dip below the ridge, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees, he realized he was lost. The trail markers had disappeared and every direction looked the same. He pulled out his phone, but of course, there was no signal. Panic started to creep in, cold and sharp. That's when he heard a faint rhythmic sound. It sounded like someone was tapping two stones together. Click-clack, click-clack. It was steady, methodical. Thinking it was another hiker, he called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" The clicking stopped. Silence. A minute passed, and he was about to call out again when the sound returned. But this time, it was closer. Much closer. He started walking faster, trying to put some distance between himself and the noise. But it seemed to pace him. When he sped up, the clicking sped up. When he slowed, it slowed. He didn't dare look back. He just kept moving, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sun had almost completely set, and the forest was bathed in a deep, dark blue. The clicking was right behind him now, so close, he could almost feel the vibration through the soles of his boots. He broke into a run, stumbling over roots and rocks in the near darkness. He didn't know where he was going, he just knew he had to get away. The clicking sound was frantic now, right at his heels. He chanced to glance over his shoulder and saw nothing, just empty, dark woods. But the sound was still there. Finally, he burst out of the trees and onto a dirt road. He saw headlights in the distance and sprinted towards them, waving his arms like a madman. A pickup truck screeched to a halt. The driver, an old man with a kind face, looked at him with wide, concerned eyes. "You all right, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." He gasped for breath, trying to explain what had happened, the clicking, the feeling of being hunted. The old man just nodded slowly, his expression grim. "You're lucky," he said. He got out. "Some folks who hear that, they don't." He never explained what that was, and the hiker never went back to find out. To this day, he can't hear the sound of two rocks tapping together without a chill running down his spine. This next story is from a former night security guard who worked at an old disused textile mill. Let's call him Mark. The mill had been shut down for decades, and his job was basically to make sure no teenagers were breaking in to vandalize the place. It was a lonely gig, just him and acres of silent, decaying machinery. For the first few months, it was uneventful. Boring, even. He'd do his rounds, read a book, and count down the hours until sunrise. But then, things started to happen. It began with small stuff. He'd leave a door closed and find it wide open on his next patrol. Tools he knew were in one place would show up somewhere else entirely. He brushed it off as his mind playing tricks on him, a product of the long, quiet nights. But one night, he heard something he couldn't ignore, the distinct sound of a child laughing. It was coming from the old weaving room, a massive, cavernous space filled with rows upon rows of rusted looms. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. He grabbed his flashlight, his heart pounding, and cautiously made his way toward the room. As he got closer, the laughter stopped. He stepped inside, sweeping his flashlight beam across the silent machines. The room was empty. Dust motes danced in the light, but there was no one there. He was about to write it off as the wind or some strange echo when he saw it. On the dusty floor, in a small patch of moonlight coming through a grimy window, were fresh footprints. They were small, like those of a child, and they were barefoot. They led from one side of the room and simply stopped in the middle of the floor. There were no prints leading away. It was as if a child had walked to that spot and vanished into thin air. Mark was terrified, but he had to finish his shift. He retreated to his small security office and locked the door. For the rest of the night, he heard whispers just outside his door and the faint sound of small feet running down the long concrete hallways. He quit the next morning and never went back. He later found out that a young girl, the daughter of a factory worker, had tragically died in an accident in that same weaving room nearly 100 years ago. Our final story for tonight comes from a couple, Sarah and Tom, who bought their dream home, a charming, renovated farmhouse in the countryside. It was picturesque, with a big yard and a classic red barn. They were thrilled. The first week was idyllic. They unpacked, painted, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. But the quiet didn't last. It started in the barn. Tom was organizing some old tools left by the previous owners when he noticed something strange. High up in the rafters, tucked away in a dark corner, was a single, old-fashioned children's shoe. It was leather, worn and scuffed, the kind you'd see in a black and white photograph. He thought it was an odd keepsake, but didn't give it much thought. He left it where it was and went back to the house. That night, they were woken up by a sound from outside. It was a soft, rhythmic thudding against the side of the house. Right below their bedroom window, thump, thump. Tom got up and looked outside, but saw nothing. The yard was empty, bathed in moonlight. He assumed it was an animal and went back to bed. But the next night it happened again. Thump, thump. This went on for a week. Every night, the same sound. They started getting unnerved. Sarah suggested they move the shoe from the barn, thinking it might be connected somehow. The next day, Tom climbed up into the rafters, but the shoe was gone. They searched the entire barn, every nook and cranny. It had vanished. That night, they braced themselves for the thudding sound, but it never came. Instead, they heard something new, soft scratching sound coming from inside their bedroom closet. Sarah and Tom froze, staring at the closet door. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. It sounded like fingernails dragging down the inside of the wood. Tom grabbed a heavy lamp from his nightstand, crept to the closet, and flung the door open. Inside, sitting right in the middle of the floor, was the single child's shoe from the barn. And next to it, scratched into the wood on the back of the closet door, were 3 words, "Where's the other?" They packed a bag and left that night, staying at a hotel. They put the house up for sale the next day and never spent another night there. They never found out the history of the house or who the shoe belonged to, and frankly, they didn't want to know. Some doors are best left unopened. These stories remind us that there are things in this world that we can't explain, whether it's a sound in the woods, a laugh in an empty building, or a shoe that won't stay put. These experiences stick with us. They become the tales we tell in hushed tones, the reason we check over our shoulder in the dark. What do you think? Do you have a story that defies explanation? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed stepping into the darkness with me tonight, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unsettling stories. Stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.